Hi, Noel. So we recently did a podcast episode on back to school, which was primarily focused on goal planning and staying organized within your life when it's back to school time. But I wanted to talk to you more about the educational sphere, one of our five spheres. Can you tell me a little bit more about it? What maybe we should be focusing on now?
Sure. So now Naima is back to school, Sabrina. We know that we're going to be relying on what we consider her formal education, everything that she's going to learn in the four walls of her school, which is great. And that's the foundation for lots of different things that she'll learn in life and giving her a lot of opportunity to do different things because she'll have a foundation of education that allows her to do that. Now, what I want to bring to light is there is still this concept of what we might think of as informal education, all of the education that comes outside of the four walls of school. And that is so critical to the betterment of an individual because it's the real life stuff that you deal with, interpersonal relationships, things like that that fall into the social sphere. That's really part of an educational sphere as well, learning how to deal with others. But specifically within the educational sphere, we're talking about things like universal understanding, the way we interact with the world and how we understand it based on what the world is teaching us. And so that concept of universal understanding, complementary instruction. Think about when people are at work and they want to learn a new skill so that perhaps they can get a better job within the company that they may work with.
Yeah.
Or if they're self-employed and they want to increase the amount of business, maybe by picking up a new skill. So these are things that we would consider informal education outside of the four walls of schooling, but certainly ways for an individual to improve their education. So those are all critical things. I'm sure you can think of some stuff that maybe Naima is involved in that again happens outside of the school. So
Absolutely. So outside of school, I mean, she just joined a club soccer team.
mhm.
With that, she's getting, more training and development technique, skills, learning all those things in soccer. But not just that, I feel like she's learning a lot about herself. She's meeting a lot new people. So with that informal education of club soccer, she's building new relationships with friends. Um, and then this summer, she did a camp with the San Antonio Broadway Theater. And they also provide singing lessons. So that's something she may be interested in doing. So I'm assuming that those two things are part of her educational sphere. Am I correct?
Absolutely. And again, all the what we might consider the informal education, the science, the math, the social studies, the English language, foreign languages, PE class, all of those things that happen in the four walls of school, that is your foundation. And it is our job, I believe, as parents, mentors, if you will, to always be sure that our kids have these opportunities to build a skill, to build knowledge, and to truly educate themselves about things that are not happening in the school. I think that also helps develop really well-rounded kids. They're not just simply drones that go to school,
Mhm.
learn these topics and then don't really know how to apply them in the real world. I think a lot of times the informal education will teach us how to use this formal education and be that much better in the world around them.
You know, our daughter, who is obsessed with Taylor Swift,
Yeah.
it's ironic because every time I've asked her if she wants to try learning an instrument, she says no. And I found out that at fifth grade at her school, they do a string, they teach you strings.
Mhm.
You pick a string instrument and you get to learn it. And it's after school for about 30, 40 minutes, maybe. She had no interest in doing it. And I told her, I said, you are going to try it. You will pick your own instrument. And she was a little bothered about that, but I said, you have to try it one time. Just try it. Feed your soul with new things. And if at that point you don't like it, well then you don't have to continue learning an instrument, but just try something new and balance that educational sphere. Am I using that
Yeah,
correctly?
Sabrina, that's perfect. And I think you just brought up a great point, which I think you just said, feed your soul. I mean, think about, just let that sink in, feed your soul. I mean, our existence in the world, we don't really know why we're here, right? And that's maybe one of the big questions. Feeding your soul, learning new skills, maybe ameliorating the skills for something more, to be able to develop a talent that you're showing ability for, really following that. Perhaps those are dreams for some people. um, I think those are so critical to our success as human beings, and certainly with our children. It's our role as adults, right, to remind them that there are all of these opportunities around you, and don't limit yourself by what you may only see in school. If anything, let school open new ideas so that this informal education outside of it can really happen and really blossom. So I think about it from Naima's perspective. Yeah, she's probably like many of us, choosing that path of least resistance,
Mhm.
right? Um, we want her to go down that road less traveled, right? We want her to explore uh, adverse situations so that she understands what she's capable of as well. That's education. Personal experience, I think, far too often. I know that when people go into interviews for jobs and things like that, they talk about, personal experience, but I don't know how much they're really focusing on, because it's such a huge thing. Like our personal experiences and what has occurred in our
Yeah,
life, that there's so much education from that. But I don't know how much that's valued versus GPAs and test scores and
mhm.
things of that nature. So
True.
I always encourage folks to think about that. Think about that informal education. If you've had grandparents who are still alive, perhaps they've had experiences that you can't even fathom, because you live in a technology world, right? We always want Naima to talk to your mom and dad so that she can grasp an understanding of, like, oh, what was it like, growing up in different parts of the world and coming to the United States as immigrants and having the experience of building a successful business and putting their kids, her mom, through school, and all of these wonderful personal experiences. That informal education is so, so important.
I feel like you and I are feeding our soul by doing these podcasts as well. And I wanted
Yeah.
to ask, we're not just talking about informal education, like you said, for children, we're talking about adults as well. And many times now, I talk to adults who are also parents, and they are just bogged down between full time jobs and children. They're not doing anything for themselves, and it's affecting their mental state. It may also be affecting their physical state. Well, I don't have time to work out because I have to work and then I have the kids. And even if you don't have kids, you're focused on work and other things. So, taking time to balance your educational sphere as an adult is so important. I know I went through it and I said, I'm not doing anything for myself. So
Mhm.
I started taking tennis lessons. I knew I loved tennis growing up and I wanted to go back to playing. And you said, never skip your tennis lesson because you come back so happy.
Right. And Sabrina, you're saying it right away, and which is what we've talked about from the get-go. The interplay between our spheres. We might start with the educational sphere, but we see that the connection to, in this case for you, using tennis as the example, your mental sphere. I mean, you think about the happiness that you get from that, and then physical sphere, you're being active. So everything again comes right back to understanding and appreciating the interconnectedness of these spheres. And so if we just focus on one, there's an interplay between all of them, and if you start to really value that and start to really explore that, you'll find that some of the activities that you can engage in really are solving problems for you in different spheres
Yeah,
of life. And so I think that's wonderful. I love the fact that even though this is something that we've created together, we're both learning from it too. It's
absolutely.
constantly evolving with us. And so I would also say, that if people are having those issues and they're watching, take a look at our app, the ability to journal. And if you're feeling overwhelmed, start organizing life in those 5 spheres and look at each sphere and start journaling, goal planning, set a task, set your reminders. It's a fantastic way to begin taking steps to being the best version of yourself.
I love that. And if I could just suggest, even when it comes to informal education, um, your task can be 1 hour out of the week to start off with.
Right.
So even if, there's 24 hours in a day, 7 days a week, give yourself that 1 hour to set a task that will help you in your educational sphere. And then if it grows from there and it's 5 hours a week, even better. But if not, that 1 hour a week, you are focusing on your educational sphere that will impact all your other parts of your life.
Absolutely. And think if it grows, you've probably found a new hobby in
Mhm.
which to really engage in and maybe meet new people, build that social sphere. Perhaps you can monetize it, build that financial
Yeah,
sphere. Perhaps it's a physical activity, you build that physical sphere. And then of course it's an outlet. It's perhaps a decompression, if you will. So you're working on that mental sphere. So you can see that interplay right there. It's a wonderful thing. It's
just
really a
start,
wonderful.
right? Just get started. All
Absolutely.
right. Thank you. And everyone, just keep feeding that soul.
Absolutely.